Alright, so we're going to be talking about Autodesk Inventor, which is a software we're going to be using for basically the rest of the semester, and you'll use it in high school, and if you follow engineering into a career, you're probably going to come across it in that career as well. So to find it on your desktop, we're looking for this orange I, the letter I Pro. Mine says 2016, yours might say 2018. Either way, just double click it. It's a pretty large software. It's going to take a while to load up. Just be patient, especially the first time you open it. It's going to take a little bit. So the first thing you're going to notice, it can be pretty confusing at first, but down here at the bottom, these are your favorites. These are not every file you've ever made. If you hadn't made anything yet, there's probably nothing down there. By the end of the semester, you're going to see a bunch of items down here. Sometimes kids come in and they go, my files aren't there anymore. It doesn't mean they're not on the computer. They're just not as a favorite. They're not pinned as a favorite. You'll need to actually go to Open up here and click Open and find them on your computer. Just something you're going to come across a little later in the year to keep in mind. The main thing we want to look at is the option for part and the option for assembly. We're not ready to quite get into assemblies yet, but we are going to be working on parts. So if I was going to come in and just start working on a part, I would click this, double click this, and it will open up a part file, or I can start building parts. You'll see this kind of bluish gray blank canvas area to work here, and that's where we'll be working. Another thing I want to show you, instead of just clicking part here, we can actually go to New, and in here we get to pick standard IPT means part. It stands for part. You can see the word part up here as a heading. But if we want to switch from standard English, so in other words, inches and feet, if we want to get out of inches, which you see the IN here in parentheses, we can go to metric. And in metric, we've got option for standard IPT for part file, but it's in millimeters. So there's some assignments that are going to ask you to do everything in millimeters or centimeters. You'll want to make sure and go change this metric to metric so you can use millimeters IPT. Same thing with assemblies down here, but we're not ready to quite get into assemblies, but you have the same option. Right now we're going to stay in English, and we'll work in a standard inches IPT. Just two different ways to get to the same thing. One gives you the option to select your measurements, and the other one doesn't. So I want to show you that. First thing, this video is just basic how to get started up, how to make shapes, some shortcuts, things like that. We're not going to get too advanced in this one, but the next one we'll start doing a little bit more of that. First thing is we want to make a sketch, a 2D sketch. In Autodesk Inventor, we work from a two-dimensional sketch and turn it into a three-dimensional object. So up in the top left, you'll see Start 2D Sketch. If yours is on 3D Sketch, you need to change it to 2D Sketch. So we'll click Start 2D Sketch. You'll see these planes come up, and it's asking us which plane we want to work in. It doesn't matter a whole lot for us. Just try to stay in the same one all the time. So for example, I'm going to work in the YZ plane, so I'll work in the YZ plane for pretty much all of this. You'll see a little grid come up, and what we're going to do is we're going to select either a line, a circle, an arc, or a rectangle to make in this grid. We'll start over with line. If you look down here, there's all these different options under the drop down. We just pretty much use the basic line. Circle, same thing. They've got different options. We just use a center point circle. Arc, we don't really ever use arc, but if you want to use an arc, we normally do the 3-point one. Rectangle, you will have some options here. We do the 2-point one most of the time. Occasionally we'll do a 2-point center where you can actually work from the center out. And we'll do polygon. If we're ever going to do a triangle, you'll use the polygon option to make a three-sided polygon. So what we're going to do right now is a 2-point rectangle. So I'm going to click that one at the top. You'll see a little crosshair, and it's just looking for me to click first. If I put it right over the center, you'll see it turns green, just letting you know that you're centered in the grid. I can click anywhere out here I want. I'm going to click one time and move my mouse around. I'm not dragging, I'm just moving my mouse. And you'll see the measurements change on my sides. My dimensions change. So I'm going to click somewhere, and now I have a rectangle exactly like I want. I can do the same thing with a circle. I'm going to go over to circle, center point. I'm going to click one time, move my mouse, and then click again. Now the measurements on that, the rectangle dimensions and circle dimensions are not very precise. They're really long. So if I wanted to make them a little more precise, I can click the dimension feature right here. You're going to use that a lot. And I can actually click on this line for this rectangle. And if I move my mouse out, you can see it's 0.706. If I click again, I can adjust that measurement. You can see it's really long running on. Let's say I wanted to make it just 0.7. I can type 0.7, 0.7, and hit enter. And now it's made that side exactly 0.7. So I can do the same thing here. I could change that to 1.4, whatever, or 1, or 0.7, or whatever I want it to be, and just like I did on the right side. But I'm going to do something a little different on this one. So I'm going to get out of that and go back to it, and I'm going to say that I want this line to be whatever from here, and I'm going to click again over here, and then it gives me the dimension line down here. So two different ways to get dimensions. I can click this line, then this line, or I could just click this line. Either way, it gives you the same thing. So I'm going to click, and I'm just going to make that an even 1 inch. So I'm going to type 1, hit enter. I don't even have to put IN for inches. If I wanted to, I could put MM for millimeters, and it would convert the measurement for me, but right now I'm just going to leave it at that. Same thing with the circle. I can click the circle, and you can see it has the diameter there. I can pull this out of the circle. The diameter of this is 0.687. So if I click, let's just make it 0.5 for a ½ inch. And I could put IN for inches, doesn't change anything. All right. I can do from object to object, I can do dimensions. So from the edge of this to the center of the circle, let's just make it a 0.5 even. Okay, so I can see all my dimensions here, and they're all 2D sketches right now. To make them 3-dimensional, I have to get out of 2D sketch, out of sketch mode, and you can see this little check mark that says finish sketch. I got to get out of sketch mode and extrude them. So I'm going to click finish sketch. You'll see it turns them to an isometric view. And then I've got this option over here, extrude. Extrude will take a 2-dimensional object and make it a 3-dimensional object. It also does a few other things, but that's the main thing. So I'm going to click extrude, and I've got 2 different shapes here, so it's asking me which one I want to make 3-dimensional. If I didn't want both of them to be 3-dimensional, I could just click one of them. If I only had one shape, if I only did this rectangle, it would automatically assume that's what I was wanting to make 3-dimensional, and it would extrude it automatically. So I'm going to click both of them, and it defaults at the distance of 1 inch over here on the right. You can kind of see this little pop-up box. Distance of 1 inch is the default. I'm going to make it a ½ inch, so I'm going to change 1 inch to 0.5. You can see it automatically adjusts those for me. We've got some options here below it. We normally just use direction 1, which is what you see here where it's coming out. I could use direction 2 where it go the other way. We could use symmetric where it goes both ways. We don't really ever use that, but it's an option there. Direction 1. We will use this option right here. It's the cut feature. We're not quite ready for it yet, but if I forget to tell you in a later video, that little option right there we will use down the road. So I like it at a ½ inch. I'm going to hit OK. And now you can see I've got 2 3-dimensional objects extruded a ½ inch, just like I wanted them to be. So the next thing I want to show you is the shortcuts. And basically it's just how to move around on this software a little quicker, a little easier, save you some time. The first thing is on your mouse. If you roll the wheel of the mouse forward, you'll see it zooms out. If you roll the wheel backwards, you'll see it zoom in. So it just gives you a little bit of an option. Wherever you put the mouse, it's going to zoom in for you. If I push the wheel in and hold it in, like press the button, and then I move my mouse around, you'll see it moves those objects for me. So if I was zoomed in on this rectangle, I could just push the mouse in, the button in of the wheel, and I can move over here to this one. All right, I'm going to roll back out a little bit. Another one you're going to really like, hold the shift button down on the keypad, push the wheel of the mouse in, and then move your mouse around. And that allows you to orbit your object and actually see it from a 3-dimensional standpoint. It gives you a lot of cool views of it. When you get into some complex objects, you're going to really need to use that a lot. So those are kind of shortcuts with your mouse and keypad that you can use. But you also have these same options up here with this wheel, this house option, and this view cube. So as you can see, I've kind of rotated mine around. It's not the view that I had it on when I first extruded it. So if I click this home button, it'll take it back to that isometric view that I started with. And that's really where we're going to work a lot. So I'm going to click that home button. It gives me an isometric view that I wanted. If I'm zoomed so far out I don't know where my object is anymore, I can click that home button. It brings it back right to that isometric view. I could click this view cube anywhere on here and just hold it and move the mouse, and you'll see that it will orbit the object just like it did when I held the shift button and then pressed the wheel of the mouse and orbited it. So it gives you that same option. And I, of course, click the home button, brings it back to isometric. I can also just click front, right, top, and kind of go through those perspective views. I can rotate it around, see all those different views. If I don't want to have to do it with my mouse and the orbit button, it can be a little hard to pinpoint it. I've got these arrows here that allow me to rotate it if I want to see some different views. You've also got this orbit button here. You could click it, and then all you got to do is move the mouse around, click and move the mouse around, and it'll orbit it for you. So those are some shortcuts. That's making basic shapes. The next video we're going to get into how to kind of edit those shapes.